Hello, my friend. Welcome to your sleep story. Tonight, I want to share a story with you that was inspired by a memory from my own childhood, a memory of a particularly quiet and heavy snowfall that seemed to wrap our little cottage in a blanket of pure silence. It was a magical feeling, as if the whole world had paused just for us. The story we are about to begin is about just such a night of quiet solitude and an unexpected, gentle visitor. It is a story about how, even in the deepest quiet, a connection can be found, a small warmth to hold against the cold. It's a story called A Quiet Winter Evening in Havenwood. But before our story begins, let us take a moment to settle in. Find your comfortable place, a place where you feel safe and supported. Let your body grow heavy, allowing the surface beneath you to take your full weight. There is nowhere to be now, nowhere to go, no obligations to attend to. This time is for you. This time is for rest. We will now begin a gentle countdown from 10, and with each number we will let go just a little bit more. 10. Let's begin with the feeling of the earth beneath you. Whether you are in a bed, on a sofa, or on the floor, feel that solid, steady support. It is holding you completely. Imagine that steadiness extending downwards deep into the ground, a firm and unwavering foundation. You are secure. You are held. There is nothing for you to do but to rest upon this certainty, this solidness that is always there beneath everything. Allow the muscles in your back, your legs, your arms to release their grip, trusting in this support. Just let go into that feeling of being completely and safely held. 9. As you rest here, know that you are in a safe space. My voice will be your gentle guide, a steady and kind companion on this journey towards sleep. It will ask nothing of you but to listen softly, to drift along with the words as you are comfortable. There is no need to try, no need to force anything. If your mind wanders, that is perfectly all right. Simply allow my voice to be a soft anchor, a gentle murmur in the background, always here to welcome you back to this moment of peace. You are safe here, and you are not alone. 8. Let us now bring a gentle awareness to your body and to your breath. Without changing anything at first, simply notice the air flowing in and out. Notice the gentle rise and fall of your chest or your abdomen. Now, let's take a slow, soft breath in, filling your lungs with calm, quiet air. And as you breathe out, imagine you're releasing any tension you might be holding. Let it flow out with the breath like a soft sigh. Soft sigh. Another gentle breath in, drawing in peace, and a long, slow breath out, letting go of the day. Feel your shoulders drop, your jaw soften, the tiny muscles around your eyes relax. Your body knows how to rest. You're simply giving it permission to do so. 7. Now, let us acknowledge the thoughts that may be drifting through your mind. Like clouds passing through a starlit sky, let them come and let them go. There's no need to hold on to them, no need to analyze them. Simply observe them for a moment, and then let them float on by. You might imagine each thought as a leaf, placed gently upon the surface of a moonlit river. Watch as the current carries it slowly away, downstream, out of sight. Another thought, another leaf. Let the river of your mind grow calm and clear reflecting only the quiet of this present moment. Whatever has been, has been. Whatever will be, will be. For now, there is only this. 6. This moment, right here, is a gift. It is a quiet sanctuary carved out of time, just for you. Remind yourself that there's nothing you need to be doing, no problems to solve, no lists to make. All of that can wait. It will be there for you tomorrow, should you need it. But for tonight, you have given yourself permission to rest. This is your time, a time for stillness, a time for quiet, a time for deep and restorative peace. Embrace the beautiful emptiness of having no obligations. 5. Within you, there is a place of deep and abiding peace. It is always there, like a calm, quiet pool in a hidden forest. Sometimes the surface may be disturbed by the winds of the day, but deep down, the stillness remains. Let your awareness sink down into that place now. Find that core of tranquility within yourself. It is your oldest and kindest friend. It is your true nature. Settle into that inner peace and let it fill you from the inside out, a gentle, warming light. 4. Let a soft feeling of gratitude wash over you. Gratitude for the simple things. Gratitude for this moment of rest. Gratitude for the roof over your head, for the warmth of your blankets. Gratitude for your body, for all that it does for you each day. Gratitude for the air you breathe. Gratitude for those you love, and for those who love you. Let this gentle warmth of appreciation settle in your heart, a soft and comforting glow. 3. Now, we will begin to engage our imagination. Let it become soft and pliable, ready to receive our story. Begin to picture a quiet, secluded valley nestled between gentle, rolling hills. See it blanketed in a thick layer of fresh, white snow. Imagine the air, crisp and cold and clean. In the center of this valley, picture a small, cozy cottage, a single plume of soft gray smoke rising from its stone chimney. A warm, golden light glows from a single window. This is where our story will take place. Allow this image to form gently in your mind. 2. Let's do one final, gentle scan of your body. Starting at the tips of your toes, feel a wave of relaxation slowly moving upwards. Feel it soften your feet, your ankles, your calves, and knees. Let it flow up through your thighs, releasing any last bit of tension. Feel your hips and your lower back sink even deeper into comfort. Let this wave of softness travel up your spine, across your stomach, and into your chest. Feel it soothe your shoulders, allowing them to fall away from your ears. Let it flow down your arms to the very tips of your fingers. Finally, let it wash over your neck, your face, and the top of your head. Your entire body is now calm, heavy, and deeply relaxed. 1. It is time now to completely let go. Let go of your body. Let go of your thoughts. Let go of your day. Allow yourself to drift, to float, to sink into a deep and peaceful sleep. As our story begins, simply allow the words to wash over you, carrying you gently into the quiet world of Havenwood and into your dreams. Completely letting go now. The village of Havenwood was not so much a place you arrived at as one you discovered. It lay tucked away in a shallow valley, cradled by hills that were old and soft, their shoulders slumped under the weight of ancient forests. In winter, the village seemed to shrink into itself, pulling a thick quilt of snow up to its chin. The chimneys of the small stone cottages puffed white smoke into the crisp air, like old men clearing their throats in the quiet of the morning. On the farthest edge of the village, where the last cobbled lane gave way to a meadow that sloped gently towards the dark line of the woods, stood a cottage that was perhaps the quietest of them all. It was the home of Arthur Pumble, a man who had lived his life to the gentle, rhythmic ticking of clocks. He was a horologist, a mender of timepieces, and his cottage was a museum of captured moments. Tonight, the snow was falling again. It was not a wild, blustering storm, but a soft, persistent descent of flakes, each one a perfect, intricate star, settling silently upon a world already white and still. The snow muffled every sound, absorbing the distant bark of a dog or the chime of the village clock until they were mere suggestions, ghosts of noises in the deep velvet quiet. Inside Arthur's cottage, the only sounds were the crackle of the fire in the hearth and the gentle, discordant symphony of dozens of clocks. Crackling fire. There was the deep, sonorous tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the corner, its brass pendulum swinging like a hypnotist's watch. There was the brisk, cheerful ticking of the mantel clocks and the almost frantic, whisper-thin beat of the tiny carriage clocks on the shelves. For Arthur, this was not noise. It was the steady, reassuring heartbeat of his life. Arthur sat in his favorite armchair, a worn leather behemoth that had long ago molded itself perfectly to the shape of his body. A thick, woolen blanket was draped over his lap, its texture soft and familiar against his hands. The firelight danced across his face, illuminating the fine web of wrinkles around his eyes and the gentle slope of his nose. His hair was a soft, white crown, as fine as spun silk. He held a cup of chamomile tea in his hands, its warmth seeping into his palms. The steam rose in a fragrant cloud, carrying the scent of honey and something faintly floral, like a memory of a summer meadow. He took a slow sip, the warm liquid a comforting presence as it traced a path down to his stomach. He was a man who found great joy in these small, quiet rituals, the making of the tea, the stoking of the fire, the winding of the clocks. Each was a small anchor in the gentle current of his days. His gaze drifted around the room, which was as much a workshop as a living space. Shelves overflowed with clocks of every shape and size. Some were old friends, their faces familiar, and their voices a constant comfort. Others were temporary guests, brought to him by villagers with worried faces, their mechanisms stilled by time or neglect. Tiny gears, springs, and screws lay in neat, ordered trays on his workbench, gleaming like scattered jewels in the lamplight. He had lived in this cottage for nearly 60 years, ever since he was a young man, apprenticed to the clockmaker who had lived here before him. He had inherited the cottage, the business, and the quiet life that came with it. His wife, Eleanor, had shared this life with him for 40 of those years, her laughter a bright silver bell that had chimed among the ticking. But Eleanor had been gone for 5 winters now, and the silence she left behind was a different kind of quiet, one that the clocks could not quite fill. Arthur did not feel sad, not in a sharp or painful way. It was a gentler melancholy, a wistful ache that came and went like the changing of the light. He missed her presence, the soft weight of her hand on his shoulder, the way she would hum to herself as she kneaded bread in the kitchen. The house was full of her, and yet it was empty. He set his teacup down on the small scarred wooden table beside his chair. The porcelain made a soft clinking sound against the wood. He watched the fire for a long moment, mesmerized by the hypnotic dance of the flames. They leapt and swayed, casting long, flickering shadows that made the clocks on the walls seem to wink and breathe. It was a living thing, the fire, a warm and vibrant heart in the center of his quiet home. A log shifted in the grate, sending a shower of bright orange sparks up the chimney. Sparking fire. The sound was sudden in the quiet room, and it drew Arthur from his reverie. He sighed, a soft exhalation of breath, and his gaze drifted towards the window. The window panes were framed with a delicate lacework of frost, but in the center, a small circle was kept clear by the warmth of the room. Through this portal he could see the snow, a swirling, endless curtain of white against the deep, dark blue of the evening. It was a beautiful night, he thought, a perfect night for being indoors, safe and warm, with a good fire and a cup of tea. He felt a familiar sense of contentment settle over him, a quiet gratitude for the simple comforts of his life. Nowhere to be now, nowhere to go, just this room, this fire, this moment of peace. He watched the flakes drift down, each one on its own silent journey. They seemed to fall in slow motion, lazy and unhurried. They collected on the branches of the old oak tree that stood guard over his cottage, weighing them down in gentle, curving arcs. They piled up on the stone wall that marked the edge of his small garden, softening its hard edges into a smooth white wave. It was as he was watching this silent, steady transformation of the world outside that he saw it. A movement. It was so subtle at first that he thought it was just a trick of the falling snow, a shadow shifting in the dim light. But then it came again, a flicker of motion near the edge of the woods, just beyond the stone wall. Arthur leaned forward in his chair, his old eyes squinting to see more clearly through the small, clear circle on the pane. He held his breath, his attention suddenly sharp and focused. The world of ticking clocks and crackling fire receded, and there was only the window and the snowy scene beyond. And then it stepped out from behind the thick trunk of a pine tree. It was a fawn, small and impossibly delicate. Its coat was the color of dried leaves, a soft, dappled brown that stood out against the stark whiteness of the snow. Its legs were long and spindly, looking almost too fragile to support its small body. Its ears, large and expressive, twitched nervously, catching the flakes as they fell. Arthur's heart gave a little squeeze, a mixture of surprise and a strange, protective tenderness. He had seen deer in the meadow many times, especially at dawn and dusk, but they were always shy, majestic creatures, seen from a distance. He had never seen one so close to the cottage, and never one so young, and all alone. The fawn took a hesitant step forward, then another, sinking almost to its belly in the deep snow. It looked lost. It turned its head from side to side, its dark, liquid eyes wide with what looked like confusion. There was no sign of its mother. The woods behind it were a dark, silent wall. The village in the other direction was a scattering of distant, sleeping lights. It seemed so very small and vulnerable in the vast, quiet landscape. A tiny, living creature in a world of white and gray. Arthur watched, his hand frozen halfway to his teacup. He felt an unspoken question form in his mind. What was it doing here? Why was it alone? The fawn lowered its head and nudged at the snow, perhaps searching for some buried grass or moss. It came up with a mouthful of white, which it shook from its muzzle with a little toss of its head. It let out a soft, bleating sound, a call so faint that Arthur could barely hear it through the thick glass of the window. It was a sound of distress, a question sent out into the silent, snowy night with no answer coming back. Arthur found he was holding his breath. He let it out slowly, his own warmth fogging the small clear circle on the window. He wiped it away with the sleeve of his woolen cardigan, his eyes never leaving the small creature. He felt a pull, a gentle but insistent tug on his heart. It was the same feeling he sometimes got when a particularly beautiful and broken clock was brought to him, a feeling of wanting to mend, to restore, to make things right. He knew he should not interfere. Wild animals were best left to their own devices. Its mother was probably nearby, waiting for him to turn off his light and go to bed. That was the sensible, logical thought. But logic felt very far away just then. All he could see was the fawn's smallness, its solitude, the way it shivered, shaking the snow from its delicate coat. Slowly, carefully, as if not to startle the creature even from inside his own house, Arthur pushed himself up from his armchair. His old joints protested with a series of quiet creaks and groans, sounds that were usually lost among the ticking of the clocks, but seemed loud now in the focused silence. He stood for a moment, leaning on the arm of the chair, his gaze still fixed on the scene outside. The fawn had stopped moving. It stood perfectly still, its head raised, its ears swiveling like sensitive instruments, trying to read the secrets of the quiet air. It looked directly towards the cottage, towards the single square of golden light in the darkness. Arthur wondered if it could see him, a shadowy figure standing behind the glass. Did it sense a presence there, a warmth? Or was it just drawn to the light, a beacon in the cold night? He had to do something. It might be foolish, it might be wrong, but he could not simply stand here and watch it shiver and call for a mother who did not seem to be coming. He would just leave something out for it, something to eat. It was a small gesture, a quiet offering to the night. He turned from the window and made his way towards the small kitchen at the back of the cottage. His slippers made a soft, shuffling sound on the worn wooden floorboards. The air grew cooler as he left the immediate embrace of the fire. The kitchen was a simple, orderly space. A stone sink, a wooden countertop scrubbed pale with years of use, and a small pantry with a faded floral curtain for a door. He opened the pantry. The scent of dried herbs, flour, and old wood greeted him. He scanned the shelves, his mind working. What did a fawn eat? He remembered seeing the deer in the summer nibbling at the apples that fell from the old tree in his garden. He had a small basket of apples left, stored in the cool of the pantry to keep them crisp. He reached for the basket and selected two of the best ones. They were small and red, their skin slightly wrinkled from their time in storage, but they still felt firm and heavy in his palm. He held one up to his nose and inhaled its faint, sweet scent, a ghost of autumn sunshine. He also found a small cloth bag of oats left over from a time when he had tried to make his own porridge, a venture Eleanor had found endlessly amusing. Perhaps the fawn would like some oats. With the apples and the small bag of oats in hand, he walked back into the main room. He paused to glance out the window again. The fawn was still there, in almost the exact same spot, a small, still statue in the falling snow. Its patience, its stillness, seemed to fill Arthur with a sense of urgency. He went to his workbench and took a small, shallow wooden bowl, one he usually used for holding tiny clock screws. He wiped it clean with the soft cloth and sliced one of the apples into thin, manageable pieces, the knife making a satisfying crunch as it cut through the crisp flesh. He arranged the slices in the bowl and then poured a small handful of oats over them. It looked like a strange sort of breakfast. He hoped it was the right thing to do. Now came the most difficult part, taking it outside. He would have to open the door, and the sound, the movement, would surely frighten the little creature away. He decided he would be as quiet and as quick as possible. He pulled on his old, fleece-lined boots, which stood waiting by the door, and shrugged on a heavy woolen coat that smelled of wood smoke and winter air. He took the bowl in one hand and reached for the iron latch on the heavy oak door with the other. He paused for a moment, his heart beating a little faster than usual. It felt like an important moment, a small deviation from the quiet, predictable rhythm of his life. He was stepping out of his warmth and into the cold, out of his solitude and into the world of another living being. He lifted the latch as slowly, as silently as he could. The mechanism, old and well-worn, made only the faintest metallic click. He pulled the door inwards. A gust of cold, clean air swirled into the cottage, carrying with it the scent of snow and pine and damp earth. It ruffled the papers on his desk and made the flames in the hearth dance wildly for a moment. The clocks seemed to tick a little louder, as if in surprise. Arthur stepped out onto the small stone step outside his door. The cold was immediate and sharp, a stark contrast to the gentle warmth of his cottage. He pulled his coat tighter around himself. The snow was falling on his face, melting on his warm skin, the flakes as soft as a moth's kiss. The world was utterly silent. The muffling effect of the snow was even more profound out here. It felt as if he had stepped into a room lined with white velvet. He looked towards the spot where the fawn had been standing. It was gone. His heart sank with a sudden, sharp pang of disappointment. He had been too slow. The sound of the latch, the opening of the door, had been enough to scare it away. He scanned the edge of the woods, the dark shadows between the trees, but there was nothing. Only the snow, fallen steadily, already beginning to cover the small tracks the fawn had left behind. He stood there for a moment on his doorstep, the bowl of apples and oats growing cold in his hand. He felt a bit foolish, a silly old man, getting worked up over a lost animal. He should have just stayed in his chair by the fire. He sighed, a plume of white breath in the cold air. But then, as he was about to turn and go back inside, he saw it again. It had not run far. It was standing near the old oak tree, partially hidden in its shadow. It was watching him, its body tense and alert, ready to bolt in an instant. Its large ears were pointed directly at him, and its dark eyes were fixed on the strange, two-legged creature that had emerged from the warm, bright cave. Arthur froze. He did not move a muscle. He and the fawn stood locked in a silent tableau, two solitary beings in the quiet, snowy night. He knew that any sudden movement would send it fleeing into the dark safety of the woods. He had to show it that he was not a threat. Very, very slowly, he lowered himself into a crouch. His old knees complained bitterly, but he ignored them. He placed the wooden bowl on the ground, just at the edge of the stone step. He slid it forward a few inches into the snow, so it was clearly visible. The red of the apple slices was a small splash of vibrant color in the monochromatic world. Then, just as slowly, he began to back away. He moved 1 foot at a time, his eyes never leaving the fawn. He backed through the doorway into the warmth of his cottage. He pulled the door almost closed, leaving just a small crack to watch through. He did not latch it. He wanted to avoid making another sound. He stood in the narrow gap, the cold air chilling one side of his face while the warmth of the fire toasted the other. He peered through the crack, his eye pressed close to the wood. The fawn had not moved. It was still watching the cottage, its gaze now fixed on the small wooden bowl sitting in the snow. Minutes passed. They stretched out, long and silent, marked only by the steady ticking of the clocks behind him. The snow continued to fall. A flake landed on the rim of the bowl. Another landed on a slice of apple. Arthur waited, his body a statue of patient stillness. He felt a strange sense of connection to the creature outside, as if they were sharing this moment, this deep and profound quiet. And then the fawn took a step, a single, tentative step out of the shadow of the oak tree. It paused, lifting its head, its nose twitching as it tested the air. It could likely smell the sweet scent of the apple, a promise of food in a barren, frozen world. It took another step, and then another, moving with a delicate, almost floating grace, its hooves making almost no sound in the deep snow. Arthur's breath caught in his throat. He watched, mesmerized as the small creature made its slow, cautious approach. It was a dance of instinct, a battle between fear and hunger. It stopped a few feet from the bowl, its body still coiled with tension, ready to spring away. It stretched its long, graceful neck forward, its nose getting closer and closer to the offering. Finally, its caution gave way. It dipped its head and took a piece of apple into its mouth. Arthur could see the slight movement of its jaw as it chewed. It swallowed and then, without hesitation, took another piece. It ate quickly, its hunger now overriding its fear. It nudged the oats with its nose, tasting them, and then began to lick them up, its small pink tongue darting into the bowl. A wave of warmth and relief washed over Arthur, a feeling so profound it almost made him dizzy. It was working. He had done the right thing. He watched until the bowl was empty, until the last oat was gone. The fawn lifted its head, licking its lips, and looked once more towards the cottage door. Its gaze seemed to pass right over the small crack where Arthur was hiding, and for a moment its eyes, dark and luminous, seemed to meet his. There was no fear in them now, only a soft, quiet curiosity. It held his gaze for a long, silent moment, a moment that seemed to stretch outside of time, beyond the ticking of the clocks. In that look, Arthur felt a flicker of acknowledgement, a silent thank you. It was a connection as real and as tangible as a spoken word. Then the fawn turned, and with a flick of its white tail, it trotted gracefully back towards the woods. It did not run in a panic. It moved with a newfound confidence, its small belly now full. It reached the edge of the trees, gave one last look back towards the cottage, and then vanished into the darkness, swallowed by the forest and the falling snow. Arthur stayed by the door for a long time after the fawn was gone, staring out at the empty meadow. The only evidence that it had ever been there was the small, empty bowl and a set of delicate, cloven tracks leading away into the whiteness. He finally closed the door, this time letting the latch fall with a soft, definitive thud. He walked back to his chair, feeling a lightness in his step that had not been there before. The cottage seemed warmer, the fire brighter. The ticking of the clocks no longer sounded like a measure of passing, solitary time, but like a room full of quiet, contented companions. He had done a small, good thing, and it had filled a space inside him that he had not even realized was empty. He sat down in his armchair and pulled the woolen blanket back over his lap. He looked around the room, but he saw it differently now. The shadows in the corners were not empty. They were just quiet places, full of peaceful darkness. The solitude of his home did not feel like loneliness. It felt like tranquility. His gaze fell upon a particular clock, one that sat on a high shelf near the workbench. It was a cuckoo clock, carved from dark wood in the shape of a little forest chalet. It was a beautiful piece, intricately detailed with tiny carved pine trees and a water wheel. But it was a sad clock. Its little wooden bird had not sung for years. The mechanism that controlled its cheerful call was broken, a delicate piece of clockwork that Arthur had never found the heart to fix. Eleanor had loved that clock. She had called the little bird Klaus, and would greet it with a cheerful, "Good morning, Klaus," whenever it popped out to sing the hour. After she was gone, its silence had seemed fitting, a reflection of the silence in his own heart. He had not been able to bear the thought of hearing its happy little song in the quiet house. So it had sat on the shelf, a beautiful but mute testament to a time that was gone. But tonight, something had shifted in him. The encounter with the fawn, that small, fragile life in the cold, had reminded him of something important. It had reminded him that life goes on, that even in the deepest winter there is warmth and connection to be found. It reminded him that quiet does not have to mean silent. He looked at the little cuckoo clock, at the tiny painted door where Klaus the cuckoo lived. He thought of the fawn, safe now, he hoped, somewhere in the woods. He thought of the small act of kindness, the bowl of apples and oats, and he made a decision. He stood up again, this time with a sense of purpose. He walked over to the shelf and carefully, gently, took the cuckoo clock down. It was heavier than he remembered and coated in a fine layer of dust. He carried it over to his workbench and set it down in the circle of bright, focused light from his work lamp. He ran his fingers over the carved wood, tracing the shape of the roof, the tiny shutters on the windows. He had forgotten how truly beautiful it was. He opened the small panel on the back, revealing the intricate brass and steel guts of the clock. It was a complex and delicate world in there, a forest of gears and springs and levers. He picked up his eyepiece, a small magnifying lens that he wore like a monocle, and fitted it into his eye socket. The world of the clock's interior sprang into sharp, magnified focus. He could see the problem immediately. A tiny lever had slipped from its cog, and a delicate bellows, the part that made the cuckoo's call, had a small tear in its fine leather. They were not difficult repairs for a man of his skill, but they required a steady hand and a patient heart. Tonight, he had both. He selected a pair of fine-nosed tweezers from a rack of tools that hung in perfect order above his bench. He reached into the clock's mechanism, his hand as steady as a surgeon's. The only sounds in the room were the crackle of the fire, the ticking of the other clocks, and the tiny metallic scrape of his tweezers against a brass gear. He worked for what felt like hours, though he did not look at any of the clock faces to mark the time. He was lost in his work, in the miniature world under his lamp. He was not just fixing a clock, he was mending a memory. He was coaxing a voice back from a long silence. He carefully reseated the slipped lever. He found a tiny scrap of supple leather, and, with a dab of special glue and the patience of a saint, he patched the minuscule tear in the bellows. He worked with a quiet joy, a deep and focused contentment. The world outside, with its falling snow and its deep, dark woods, faded away. His world was this small circle of light, this intricate puzzle of brass and wood. Each tiny screw he tightened, each gear he cleaned with a soft brush, was a small victory against the silence. Finally, the work was done. He removed his eyepiece and blinked, his eyes adjusting to the softer light of the room again. He gently closed the back panel of the clock. He took a small brass key from a hook on the wall and carefully wound the clock's two mechanisms, one for the time and one for the cuckoo. He looked at the face of the grandfather clock in the corner. It was almost 10 o'clock. He set the hands of the cuckoo clock to match, turning them slowly until they read 5 minutes to the hour. Then he hung the clock on a hook on the wall above his workbench. He stood back and waited. The 5 minutes passed in what felt like a deep and profound silence. Even the other clocks seemed to have quieted their ticking, as if holding their breath in anticipation. Arthur stood in the middle of his workshop, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes fixed on the little painted door above the clock's face. Then the minute hand clicked into place at the top of the hour. There was a soft whirring sound from within the clock, a sound of gears turning, of life stirring after a long sleep. And then the little painted door popped open. Out came the small wooden bird, bobbing its head forward, and a sound filled the room, a sound that had not been heard in 5 long years. Cuckoo, cuckoo, soft cuckoo sound. It was a soft, gentle sound, not loud or jarring, but clear and sweet, like a call from a distant, sunlit forest. It called 10 times, once for each hour, its voice a cheerful, 2-note song. When it was finished, the little bird bobbed once more and then retreated back into its house, and the tiny door snapped shut behind it. The silence that followed was different. It was not an empty silence. It was a peaceful silence, a silence that was now punctuated by the promise of a song. Arthur let out a breath he did not realize he had been holding. A slow smile spread across his face, crinkling the corners of his eyes. He felt a tear trickle down his cheek, but it was not a tear of sadness. It was a tear of quiet, overwhelming joy. He did not wipe it away. He let it fall. "Welcome back, Klaus," he whispered into the quiet room. He felt as if a window had been opened in his heart, letting in the fresh, clean air. The house no longer felt empty. It felt full, full of ticking and chiming and the memory of a fawn in the snow, full of the presence of his Eleanor, not as a sad absence, but as a warm and happy memory, a memory that could now live alongside a cheerful cuckoo's song. He walked back to his chair and sat down, feeling a deep and pleasant weariness settle over him. He had done enough for one night. He banked the fire, the embers glowing like sleeping jewels in the ash. He watched the pendulum of the grandfather clock swing back and forth, a steady, reassuring rhythm, back and forth, tick and tock. The snow had not stopped falling. It continued its silent, relentless work of beautifying the world, of softening its edges and quieting its sounds. Arthur watched it through the window, his mind calm and his heart full. He thought of the fawn, and he sent a silent wish out into the night, a wish for its safety, for its warmth, for it to be reunited with its mother. And, as if in answer to his wish, he saw another movement at the edge of the woods. This time it was a larger shape, a taller, more graceful silhouette against the snow. It was a doe, its head high, its ears alert. It stood for a moment, and then took a few steps into the meadow. Just then, The small shape of the fawn emerged from the trees and trotted to its mother's side. It nudged her with its head, a gesture of reassurance and belonging. The doe bent her neck and licked the top of the fawn's head, cleaning the snow from its coat. They stood together for a moment, two dark shapes in the vast whiteness, a perfect picture of reunion. Arthur watched them, his heart swelling with a quiet, profound contentment. He had not saved the fawn, not really. He had simply offered a moment of comfort, a small point of warmth on its journey. The mother had been there all along, perhaps waiting, watching from the safety of the trees. He had been a small, brief chapter in its life, and it had been a significant one in his. The doe and the fawn turned, and side by side they walked back into the woods, their shapes merging with the shadows until they were gone. The meadow was empty once more, the falling snow already covering their tracks, leaving the world pristine and untouched, as if they had never been there at all. But Arthur knew they had. The empty bowl and the full heart in his chest were proof. He leaned his head back against the soft leather of his armchair. The warmth of the room, the gentle symphony of the clocks, the memory of the sweet cuckoo song, all wrapped around him like the softest of blankets. His eyelids grew heavy. The world began to soften at the edges, the firelight blurring into a warm, golden haze. He was home. He was safe. And he was not alone. The quiet of his life was no longer a vast, empty space, but a comfortable, peaceful room, filled with the gentle ticking of time, the memory of kindness, and the promise of a song on the hour. As he drifted off to sleep, his last conscious thought was of the snow, falling softly, covering the world in a blanket of deep and profound peace. And in his dreams he heard the faint, sweet sound of a cuckoo, calling softly from a distant sunlit wood. He was at peace, a deep and abiding peace that settled into his very bones. A quiet winter evening in Havenwood that had changed everything by changing almost nothing at all. He slept, and the clocks kept their gentle watch over him, their hands sweeping silently through the peaceful night.